the whole ethos in the company is around delivering value for customers. Rather than being a focus on valuation, it's about value creation and what is the value creation that we're bringing to the customers and to the communities in which they operate. So I think, it's the fact that we are an entrepreneurial organization in terms of the people that we hire, in terms of the mission to empower entrepreneurs, in terms of the fact that we are led by two entrepreneurs. And that is something that is difficult to find in other organizations. Know when and when not to listen to mentors, right? If I had listened to my mentors, I wouldn't have gone for OakNorth because I would have been talked out of it, essentially. And then you could potentially miss an opportunity. Second, I would say, is to be opportunistic, right? And not be afraid to ask for what you want, right? If I hadn't asked Rishi and Joel for the job, I may not have ever been offered it. And so finding, being able to spot those opportunities and then not being afraid to sort of grasp for them when they present themselves.
Hello everyone, welcome to the new episode of Professionals Unplugged. I am your host Utkarsh Shukla, and let me introduce you to my guest Valentina. Valentina, thank you so much for joining in.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Thank you so much. So let's start with a very basic question. Can you please introduce our audience to yourself, like who you are, what work you do, anything you want us to know about you?
Sure. So I'm Valentina. I started my career in a company called Lanson's, communications consultancy. I'm the corporate affairs director at OakNorth. We are a digital bank for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs, so founded by two great entrepreneurs, Rishi Khosla and Joel Perlman in 2015. And I've been working with them since 2015, since June 2015. And then initially as a consultant, then I did a secondment and joined full time in 2016.
That's really nice. And since you have been associated with this bank from the pretty beginning of it, right? So can you just elaborate us on the journey till now and what were the biggest challenges that you think you have faced till now?
Absolutely. So just a little bit of background about OakNorth. So Rishi and Joel, this is actually their second business. They founded their first business, Copal Partners, in 2002. And they met at the London School of Economics when they were studying for their masters. So Copal was their first business they started together in 2002. It was a data and analytics company. And about 3 years into that journey, in 2005, they were looking for a working capital facility of about £100,000. And they went to the high street banks here in the UK and kept getting a sort of computer says no response. Fortunately, over the next few months, they were in the US several times, and one of their clients, Special Situations Desk of an investment bank, offered them a 10 million dividend recap. So they sort of said, we can't get £100,000 working capital, but we can get 100x the amount, even though the company is the same size. And they sort of thought, okay, something's broken here. And over the years, they met many more entrepreneurs who'd had similarly poor experiences when it comes to banking. I think one of the challenges is that within banking, and if you look at the investments over the last 15, 16 years in banking since the financial crisis, you've had a lot of investment in the retail offering. So, lots of apps, automation, personalization, and you've sort of got consumer plus when it comes to business, so again, you can sort of, if you're a very small or micro business, you can be well catered by some of the newer players. Once you kind of get to the million to 100 million turnover, there's this sort of gap where, you can't be well serviced by some of the new players, but you're equally still too small to be getting the sort of five-star treatment from the large banks. So Rishi and Joel met many entrepreneurs who had a similar experience, and then once they'd scaled Copal to 3,000 people across 11 markets, they sold it to Moody's Corporation in 2014. And then they set out to launch OakNorth. And how I came across the business, a little bit of backstory. So my mum is an entrepreneur. So I've always seen firsthand the challenges that she's had in growing her business and dealing with the banks when trying to grow her business. So the mission and the idea of a bank for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs really resonated with me. I was introduced to Rishi in the summer of 2015. So OakNorth had secured its provisional banking license from the PRA and the FCA, but hadn't yet received its full license. It was in something called mobilization phase. Um, and so, I was introduced to Rishi and Joel at that point. And then in sort of end of 2015, I had the opportunity to do a secondment with the business. And within a few months, I realized that the days I enjoyed the most were the days that I was going to the OakNorth office in London. And I sort of thought, well, maybe I should ask Rishi and Joel if they will consider giving me a job full time. And I spoke to some mentors about this, and they said, look, you're too young, you're still in your 20s, you don't have enough experience. This is a startup, it doesn't have any money yet, it's not profitable, you'd be taking a huge risk. Why would you leave a perfectly good job? Um, and then I spoke to some friends, and they sort of said, well, you're in your 20s, so you can take the risk, and you don't have a mortgage or kids to feed or anything like that. If there was ever a time to do it, it's probably now. And yeah, okay, it's a startup and maybe it will fail, but if it does, then you've still got your whole life. And if it doesn't, then you have the chance to be part of, potentially a very high growth company at a very early stage. So fortunately, I didn't listen to my mentors, and I emailed Rishi and Joel asking to meet with them. And fortunately, they were very open to the idea of me joining full time. I think I had my contract 2 days later to sign and join full time after I'd done my notice period in my other job. I joined full time in 2016, in mid 2016. And then over the years, my role has sort of expanded. So initially, I came in really to do communications and public relations. Over the years, the role has really broadened to include internal communications, um, ESG and sustainability. So we have some very ambitious net zero targets and sustainability objectives. And we also have something called our 1+1% commitment, whereby we donate 1% of our profits and 1% of our team's time to supporting charitable causes. And that's, obviously as we grow, that pool of funds grows. So working with colleagues to make sure that we're distributing those funds in an impactful way. And then more recently, sort of taking on more of the work around our public policy and government relations as well.
I think that's really a great experience that you have shared with us, and you have just told us why it is important to listen to your heart over your brains, or sometimes go flow rather than over the analytics, right? So, if I ask you as a CAD, right, Corporate Affairs Director at OakNorth, what are your day-to-day responsibility and what are the biggest challenges that you see nowadays?
So, I mean, look, really day to day, I mean, it's going to sound incredibly cliched, but it really is very, very varied. And, no 2 days are the same. I mean, I could be, spending time speaking with someone like yourself, being a spokesperson for the company, and I do get the opportunity to join some really interesting events and do interesting podcasts, and opportunities like these. It could be, meeting with the team to go through some of the CSR or charitable applications we've had, to see where, based on the budget that we have available, where might it be highest impact in terms of allocating funds. It could be sitting down with our a project management team really to look at potentially we've got M&A activity and the communications around that, both externally and internally. Big piece of work at the moment is around our annual results. So this is, 150 plus page document. Within that, for the first time this year, we've also incorporated our TCFD disclosures. So these are our basically our disclosures in terms of what we're doing with regards to climate and sustainability. And it's the first time we're bringing them in line with our annual reporting. That's about 60 pages of the report. So going through all of that, I've got a call later today to go through some of the initial feedback from Rishi, from our CEO and co-founder, to go through those. Earlier today was speaking to a very interesting organization, a membership body. They'd like Rishi to speak at an event they're hosting for entrepreneurs. So sort of talking through some of the subjects we might want to cover off, some of the topics, some of the questions. So it really is very, very varied. But as I say, in terms of the areas that I oversee and the teams I predominantly work with, it's around internal and external communications. It's corporate development, working with our head of corporate development and investor relations, Jules DeMambro. It's working on public policy and government relations, so looking at if there's certain consultations we want to be responding to, whether it's from the FCA or the House of Lords. There could be a number of consultations at any one time that we might want to feedback on. Working with the various trade associations and membership groups, Innovate Finance, Bankers for Net Zero, Boardwave. We have a number of groups that we're part of and wanting to make sure that we get the value out of being members of those different organizations. Um, Events and content. So again, I mean, last year we did over 150 events across over the year, including internal and external events. So again, working with the team to make sure that we're getting value out of those. Content creation, that could be, a draft opinion editorial or blog on behalf of Rishi or Joel. It could be preparation for a member of the team who might be speaking at an event or doing a podcast and they want to have some talking points. It could be drafting a blog or an article off the back of something that we've done, a webinar we might have hosted, and doing the write-up for that. And then, as I say, ESG and sustainability, we've got, a number of very ambitious net zero targets, including some interim targets. We want to get to net zero for scope 1, 2, and 3 by 2035. We've been net zero for scope 1 and 2 since 2019. So looking at the interim targets and saying, okay, what do we need to change in our current strategy? Where do we need to start making some amends to what we're currently doing in order to ensure that we can hit those targets? And if we can't, then how do we communicate that effectively?
Yep, I think these are a variety of roles that you just mentioned to us, right? So next question is like how you try to maintain balance between all these different tasks that you are handling on day-to-day activities and how you try to prioritize them.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, I guess a few things. My inbox functions a bit like my to-do list, so I never have unread emails. I know some people, I look in their inbox and I see, literally hundreds of bold emails that are just unread. That would really stress me out. So I read every email and then I basically color code it. So, it might be green is for corporate. It might be blue is for M&A. It might be purple is for an internal event. Red is for external events. I mean, this is yellow is media relations. These are just things that I know from my inbox. And then it's very easy because then I can sort of go through at the start of each week, looking at, okay, what are the things that need my attention this week? And I can just sort of flag those. And then I can filter by color code essentially. So I know what are the corporate things that are on my agenda this week? What are the external events that I need to be looking at this week? What are the internal events and so on? So my inbox sort of functions a bit like that. Two, obviously, kind of comes with the territory, but communication, right? So communicating, getting clear deadlines from people as to when they need something. Sometimes it's obvious, right? Like I mentioned before, if we're responding to a consultation, there's a deadline for those consultations. So we know when we need to kind of do it by. So then I just work backwards from there. Well, if I need these internal stakeholders to review it, then I need to give them enough time. I can't just send it to them the day before. So I need to make sure that I've got it ready for them to review by this date. But if they have feedback and they want me to make quite substantial changes, I need to leave that enough time for myself to do that. So then if it's actually, let's say the due date was today, 18th of February, I'd ideally want to have sent it to them last Tuesday, the 11th of February, so that they would have sufficient time to review it. So making sure to communicate and get that communication in terms of deadlines and understanding when certain work is due. Um, I think the fact is delegating is also really, really important. I think especially when you've started in an organization early doors like I did, where there wasn't a big team and there wasn't a lot of people who you could potentially delegate to. So you become very used to just doing everything yourself. But the fact is, you're not going to ever do everything as perfectly or as well if you're completely stretched. And I think also recognizing that certain people will have much better skills than you at doing something. So actually better to leave it to them, leave it to the expert. And that then frees up time for you to take on additional responsibilities. As I said, my role started as communications, but over the years has expanded. And that's really because through delegating and being able to work with a broader and larger team, then I've had the opportunity to take on new responsibilities and new challenges and look at other areas that might be interesting. So delegating is also really crucial. And I suppose, I never had um, such a clear experience of doing that than when I went on maternity leave and I had to, leave everything, in the hands of colleagues. I think obviously you have a moment of panic and worry about that. And then you just see actually it's totally fine and everything runs completely fine. You have to trust that you've brought on a great team and you've worked with them to ensure that they have the skills and the capabilities to cover. So yeah, so I think it's really a combination of all those things. I don't know if I always get it right, but I would say I generally feel like I'm able to cover all those different areas. And if there is something which I think I might need more time on or I need help on, I'll just ask for it, right? I'll either ask a colleague or I'll ask whoever is expecting the piece of work from me if I can have a bit more time. And I'm always trying to find who within the organization can help me, right? Rather than trying to rely on doing everything, myself. Obviously, with new tools, AI tools like ChatGPT, Claude, those are huge, huge ability to unlock efficiencies and productivity gains, in terms of content creation, in terms of diary management, and just, with a lot of things, just having some initial words on a paper, which can be really helpful as a starting point rather than starting from a completely blank sheet of paper. So yeah, trying to find how I can use different tools like that as well to kind of unlock those productivity gains.
I think that's really great. And you have just told us and enlightened us on the importance of communication, right? So just one question on the same, like suppose there is some crisis happened in the organization, right? So how do you handle the crisis communication, maybe with internal or external teams, and how you try to maintain the reputation at the same time?
Absolutely. So, I mean, look, every crisis is different. You have to, as a regulated bank, do a degree of crisis planning for different scenarios, a sort of recovery plan across several different scenarios. And I think, look, the first thing to say is if it's an external thing and it could be, let's say, a journalist or a publication has got in touch, they've heard something or they want to get our perspective on something. I think, we generally have a very good relationship with the press. We have huge respect for the press and what they're doing. And we want to be, honest and transparent and maintain a very good relationship. So we invest a lot of time in that and we will give them the time as well, right? I think that's very important. A lot of organizations will either sort of just ignore it or they will say, no, we're not gonna engage. We're just gonna say no comment. Or they'll go really aggressive and sort of send in lawyers immediately. And I think, we really, as I say, we have built relationships with a lot of journalists over the years. So we'll have a conversation and figure out, what it is exactly that the angle is, what's the story, and then try to provide as much information as we can, to hopefully provide clarity. I'd say overall we've been very fortunate, largely because we tend to do the right thing, but also that we really, I mean, if you Google OakNorth, you'd be hard pressed to find, a negative article, and that's really, as I say, obviously testament to the fact that we are doing the right things. I hope across the organization, but also that we have invested time in those relationships. If there was something else that happened, maybe it could be more of a macroeconomics thing that then is impacting us as an organization. Again, communication is just so crucial. We do have crisis comms plans in place. We have almost a template put in place so that if I wasn't available, or even if the team wasn't available for some reason, in theory, the organization should know what to do and the steps to take. We work with some great external advisors as well. So, it's always useful when there has been a crisis to do a sort of a sort of review afterwards, a post-mortem to sort of see, okay, what could we have done better? Where, was there something else we could change? And again, as I say, it totally depends. Some of them, you really want to make sure that you're bringing the right stakeholders in at the right time. There can be a tendency in an organization to kind of go into a panic and then bring so many people into the room. And that can actually be, very difficult then to kind of get anything productive done. It's just sort of too many cooks in the kitchen. So really trying to home down to who are those handful or so people who really need to be in the room at this time, and let's then hash out a plan, based on whatever the crisis is at that time. And then, of course, you can bring in additional stakeholders as and when needed, but having that sort of core management, project management team is really essential. Or that core crisis team is really essential, and that's really the starting point. Then you're mapping out your stakeholders. You're thinking about who do we need to communicate to? How are we communicating to them? I mean, is it something that you need to communicate in person or over a phone call, or is it something that can be done in writing? How personalized does that communication need to be? Right? If it's something that's impacting, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of customers, it's not going to be feasible for you to communicate to each one by one, right? So you've got to then think of a way to communicate to that broad group, thinking about what is actually being said in the communication. So, that you're not divulging any commercially sensitive information or any personal details in there. So just kind of doing a bit of a sense check around that as well is really, really important. And then, making sure that, as I say, you're kind of letting the other stakeholders know. So that could be your board, it could be the regulators, it could be your internal team. So making sure that people are informed and aware, and that if something is going to appear in the press, that's not the first time that they're hearing about it, ideally, but that they've already been informed. Your investors are obviously another big stakeholder. So it's really trying to map out who do we need to inform and when do we need to inform them, and then how do we need to do that based on what we're saying.
Yeah, I think that all totally makes sense. Like indulging with only those people who are required in particular sense, and only have a handful of people, right? So we can save all other times. Correct.
Yeah, exactly.
And with the rise of the social media, do you think corporate communication has evolved over the time?
You know what? I actually think it's probably less about social media and it's more about the sort of rise of fake news, and the sort of undermining of traditional media outlets, right? It's obviously very expensive to run, a newspaper. So unfortunately, now you do have a situation where a lot of the credible news sources are behind paywalls. And if you can't afford a subscription for the Times, the Financial Times, the Wall Street Journal, and so on, then you're sort of, where do you go to get your news? And if you then go to social media, those platforms are designed to basically send you more information that is like information you've read before. So if you start reading about some kind of conspiracy theory, it's going to send you more content that will, either try to prove or disprove
Yeah.
that, depending on which way you're looking at it, right? And so you can end up with this sort of echo chamber where you end up kind of only reading content or watching content that is kind of aligned with your political values, your cultural values, and so on. And this is obviously what we've seen with elections all over the world, where they can really be won by what's on social media. So I would sort of say, from a business's perspective, I think it can be very challenging to not kind of get distracted by all the noise. And we certainly saw this in previous years, corporates wanting to get behind, whatever thing might be happening in the world. And the challenge with that is that you probably can't be a credible voice for absolutely every issue. And so I think trying to sort of say, what are the things that really matter to us as an organization? Um, what are the things that, aren't going to lead to sort of polarization within our working team, right? Because if you've got, and as I say, politically, people obviously will have very different political views within an organization. You'd expect that. So trying to avoid situations where you've got teams of people who then refuse to work with other people because, they don't agree with their political leanings is obviously not going to be, not going to make for a very productive workforce or very enjoyable working environment. So I think at least at OakNorth, we've really tried to, I suppose, just sort of maintain a position of being pretty neutral on things and just sort of saying, we're all brought together because we're OakNorthers and we all share a desire to support entrepreneurs and empower entrepreneurs. And that's the mission and the vision that we're trying to achieve. And if we can achieve that, it's going to be hugely beneficial for communities and economies around the world. Thousands, tens of thousands of new homes, tens of thousands of new jobs, billions added to GDP growth. So that really in and of itself is a pretty strong social cause to get behind. But I think certainly for corporates, it's sort of understanding what are the things we want to be known for, and if we are going to kind of get behind a particular issue, what's the most genuine way to do that? So it doesn't come across like we've just sort of getting on the bandwagon of the next cause, essentially.
Right. And with the rise of AI, how is it, how you as like at the top of the hierarchy when it's come to the growth, right? Seeing AI getting used in the bank, in the banking
Mhm.
especially. So what's your point of view on it?
I mean, one of the things I really have enjoyed in recent months is sort of doing these showcases, I guess, within the business. So, you get to hear different case studies of team members and teams who have used AI to unlock some kind of productivity gain or efficiency gain. And firstly, it's a great way to discover new tools that you might not have had the opportunity to use yet. But also, you find these use cases and you think, wow, I would never have thought about using it for something like that. I give some examples from OakNorth. We have to do a lot of training as a regulated bank. And let's be clear, some of the training can be quite dull. Just, it's a lot of it's repetitive and I suppose a little bit common sense. So when you're trying to then think about how can we make this more interesting, some teams have used AI to sort of gamify it. So there's sort of a leaderboard and it shows, the ranking of, who's scoring particularly well in terms of how they've answered and how quickly they've answered, and then whoever wins gets a prize. Others have sort of turned some of the content into, video content. I mean, a Netflix style documentary, I think, was one of the things I saw. I wouldn't say it was quite that level, but around cybersecurity. And of course, that's an interesting way for someone who's more of a visual learner rather than learning from reading. That can be a really good way to kind of ensure that information really sinks through. You can also have obviously sometimes very large, very long documents around certain things, whether it's consumer duty or GDPR. These can be 60, 70-page documents that are very dense and difficult to digest. You can use a tool like Notebook LM, which can then turn that into a podcast of 15 minutes, and then you can listen to that and get the sort of high level perspective, which can then give you the basis to then go into the document and read it with sort of that initial clarity and understanding. And again, if you're someone more like me who's more of an oratory learner, then actually something like that can be really helpful to sort of consume that information. So I really enjoy seeing these sort of solution showcases within the business. And you hear people sort of saying this thing used to take me 10 hours a week and now I do it in 10 minutes. And you just think, wow, that's really, really amazing. And I think we're really keen to do more of that. We want to keep growing, 20% year on year without really growing our headcount. I mean, as an organization, we're very, very lean, especially given the profits that we make, which are, in excess of $200 million in 2023. We haven't published our 24 results yet, but globally we have about 700 people, so a very lean organization, considering the growth and the profits that we make, and that's really driven by the technology that we use and trying to leverage tools like ChatGPT, Notebook LM, Claude, and others to create those productivity gains wherever possible.
That's really nice. Do you think it can also be used in terms of customer facing applications?
Absolutely. I mean, you see this, right? You've seen this with other fintechs. I mean, examples that come to mind, Klarna, which is using that to deal with a lot of customer queries. So, we've all seen and probably all experienced using a chatbot when we've dealt with a bank. Obviously, I think, again, you have to think about who's the end user. And at the end of the day, if it's a business that wants to borrow $5 million, then probably they don't want to deal with a chatbot. They want to deal with a human. And actually, you're going to get a lot more value from that if you build a human to human relationship. But there could be parts of the journey, right? Whether it's in terms of putting together the credit analysis, the credit paper, whether it's in terms of the portfolio monitoring and spotting early warning indicators, potential red flags that you might want to discuss with the customer, whether it's running scenario analysis to see how, perhaps a base rate change might impact, or a piece of regulation might impact the business. So we use AI and machine learning really across the business, and we have been for several years in that way. But I think, as you say, in terms of the customer facing application, it's it sort of depends on the product, right? I think, as I say, we're doing business lending and business banking, so there are certain parts which probably, will lend themselves more naturally to using AI versus others where I think a human relationship is really crucial. And I think we'll always try to find it's always going to be a human-led business, but with technology enhancing the human as opposed to replacing them.
That's really nice. And if I ask you for your advice in your entire journey, what have you gone through, right? So, what are the biggest learning that you have found out till now?
So one is, I think I mentioned before, about mentorship, and I have, been really, really fortunate to have amazing mentors in my career to date, and I think it's great if you can also mentor other people and sort of pay it forward. But you have to know when not to listen to mentors, right? If I had listened to my mentors, I wouldn't have gone for OakNorth because I would have been talked out of it essentially. And then you could potentially miss an opportunity. Second, I would say, is to be opportunistic, right? And not be afraid to ask for what you want, right? If I hadn't asked Rishi and Joel for the job, I may not have ever been offered it. And so finding, being able to spot those opportunities and then not being afraid to sort of grasp for them when they present themselves. And then I think the final thing, or really a key learning that I've had, is that there's going to be a lot of things in your career that will take you outside of your comfort zone. Um, and I think back to 2017, Rishi asked me to do a podcast, and because he couldn't do it anymore, he didn't have the time. And I was like, no, 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 no. I don't want to do any public speaking. I'm really nervous, and it's not like I'm just not a public speaking person. I'm happy to help you prepare, but I don't want to be the person doing the talking. And he was sort of like, look, you know everything. You've written these talking points for me, so you know what to say. You're going to be fine. And if you don't do it, then they're not going to have anyone for their show, and it'll be, difficult for them to plan so last minute. So just try it, push past the fear and just go for it. And I remember I was really annoyed because I actually had a first date that evening. And I remember thinking, now it's just going to ruin my date because I'm going to have to do this podcast. I'm going to be all nervous. And then I'm going to have to go to this date and I'll just be all stressed out. But fortunately, it all went fine. And I actually ended up going to the date and I was really happy and I was feeling really confident and empowered. And so it was a really great first date. And I've now been on that podcast 29 times, and I'm married to the man who I went on that first date with and have a 2-year-old son with him. So, again, I think just not being afraid to take on new challenges. There's almost certainly going to be things that are scary that will happen in your career, or new responsibility that you'll be given a new team or department to oversee. And I think actually, if you're willing to take on those challenges, you'll just see your career really, really fly. So So yeah, so try and be a mentor, try and find mentors, but know, when's the right time to listen, be opportunistic, and try to overcome fear.
It's really great. Last but not the least, what's next for you, or what is the main goal for you now?
I think there's so many exciting things happening at OakNorth, right? We're expanding geographically. We launched in the US about 18 months ago, and that's really a big growth area for us. We're expanding our product suite. So we've also, end of 2023, we announced plans to move into broader business banking. So beyond just lending, but offering business banking accounts, savings accounts, payments, FX, and so on. So we've got a number of really fantastic features and products in the pipeline, and a lot of work that's going into expanding the product suite. As I say, we want to, and we continue to explore. We've done a little bit of M&A in the past. We continue to explore M&A opportunities which are aligned with our strategic objectives, albeit taking the view that we want to grow organically rather than through M&A. But if there is a good opportunity that presents itself, then we'll absolutely explore it further. And then, as I say, my role has really expanded, and this year a big piece of work around the sort of the public policy, the government relations, especially in the US. That's going to be a big piece of work and a lot of new relationships to establish. But yeah, I mean, it's always exciting. There's always something new on the horizon, and I go into the year thinking this is what it's going to look like, and then a whole bunch of things happen, which mean that you get taken in a whole bunch of different and exciting directions. So, I'm really, really bullish on the growth of OakNorth and very excited about the years ahead. And yeah, I would hope that everybody, who's there and anybody who might be applying for a role with us, that they'll have the opportunity to see all of the exciting progress as well.
Right. And I want to end this podcast on one note, like what is that one point that you think makes Oak North stands out in the market?
I think it's probably the fact that it is such an entrepreneurial organization, right? There are a lot of digital banks out there. I mean, there are thousands of banks globally, but most of them have a tenured CEO, right? So someone who will come in for 4, 5, 6 years and then move on. The fact that we're founder-led and Rishi and Joel are so involved with the business means that decisions are really taken for the long term, and that the whole ethos in the company is around delivering value for customers. Rather than being a focus on valuation, it's about value creation and what is the value creation that we're bringing to the customers and to the communities in which they operate. So I think, it's the fact that we are an entrepreneurial organization in terms of the people that we hire, in terms of the mission to empower entrepreneurs, in terms of the fact that we are led by two entrepreneurs. And that is something that is difficult to find in other organizations, especially, I think, in financial services.
That's really amazing. So thank you so much, Valentina, for your time. It was really a lovely experience for me, and I've learned a lot from you. So thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much. Thank you.